Well, good day and welcome back to the Johnson Space Center for today's briefing to preview U.S. Spacewalk number 37. Just days after the last spacewalk to install a new docking port on the International Space Station, we're back at it again, getting ready for the second spacewalk in just 13 days by Jeff Williams and Kate Rubins. With us today to talk about the upcoming EVA and reprising his role as lead flight director is Zeb Scoville. Thanks for joining us today, Zeb. And our lead spacewalk officer for the September 1st EVA, John Malarski. And we'll start off with Zeb.
Thanks, Rob. Good afternoon. It's good to be back with you. The last week and a half and the coming weeks on the space station really are an example of human exploration at full throttle. As you know, last Friday, as Rob said, we had a very successful spacewalk number 36 with the installation of the International Docking Adapter. We got all of our planned objectives done on that EVA. And now the ISS has a shiny new front door and welcome mat for crewed vehicles to come up and visit the station next year. We ended up stopping that EVA right around the 6-hour mark. The crew was experiencing a few challenges with their comm cap. They lost communication in one of Jeff's earphones. This is actually just because a little water droplet had gotten into the ear tube and prevented sound from going through there. And we'd had a very successful day and decided to call our victories and come inside and celebrate. So after that EVA, this week has really been focused primarily on getting the Dragon capsule packed up, getting a lot of really high priority science put away and ready for return and landing. So that vehicle will be released on early Friday morning. And then after that, really the crew's focus shifts very intently on to the upcoming EVA number 37. So the primary objective of this EVA is to retract a thermal control radiator that's out on the P6 truss. You may hear us refer to this radiator as the ticker. What that stands for is trailing thermal control radiator, and it's kind of a holdover name that comes from when that entire truss segment was actually located on the top of the station during the early assembly phase. The reason why we're retracting this radiator is because it's not in use anymore. It's fully extended, and while it's there, it's kind of exposed to the external environment and susceptible to any orbital debris or damage that may come its way. It's one of our high priority spares. We really want to be able to get it retracted and covered up so we can count on it in the future should the need arise. Beyond the ticker, I should mention that this isn't our first attempt at retracting this radiator. We tried once in the past on EVA 33. Towards the end of the EVA, we ran into some challenges there with some instability in the station motion control system. And we were running out of crew day length and EVA time, so we decided to re-extend the radiator at that point and come back to fight another day, which will be next week. So beyond the radiator retraction itself, we have some other really interesting objectives on this EVA. One that I'm particularly interested in myself is installation of some high-definition television cameras we're going to be installing outside. The main interest in these cameras is that it allows us to get some really just excellent high-res imagery of the Soyuz vehicles that the crew uses to return to at the end of their increments. This will allow us to give a good inspection of them and make sure they're in top shape for the crew's safety and return. In addition, there's a lot of really great secondary objectives we get out of these cameras. There's going to be some great opportunities for Earth observation as well as inspections of the rest of stations. So I'm really expecting to see some just fantastic imagery coming out of these cameras when we install them outside. So the EVA, as I said, will be next Thursday. The crew will be coming out of the Quest airlock at about 7:10 in the morning Central Time. Once again, as we saw in the last EVA, Jeff will be EV1 with the red stripes, and Kate will be EV2 with the white stripes in her suit. And really just looking back at the last EVA, these guys both performed just an outstanding job. This was Kate's first EVA as a rookie, but you certainly wouldn't have known it. Their sort of combination of athleticism and problem solving really, in my mind, is a perfect blend of Michael Phelps, Simone Biles, and Mark Watney. So we just couldn't be more pleased with how they did. In addition to the primary tasks I mentioned with the radiator retraction and the camera installations, there's a few other tasks that we are doing. I sort of put these in the category of routine maintenance, similar to what you might do with your car at home. There's a rotating joint that we have outside that we've lubricated in the past, and so we're just going to go inspect that, make sure the lubrication is still good. There's some struts outside near that joint that we've been detecting a very small vibration or shimmy in it, and so the crew can go back outside, re-torque some of the bolts to make sure that those struts are secure, and as I said, that's really just preserving and keeping our vehicle in top shape for its sustained use throughout the life of station. A couple aspects of variability we have coming up for this EVA lie in our camera installation task. On Saturday morning, after the ground control releases, or after the ground releases the Dragon capsule, the ground's going to take control of the robotic arm from the crew, and we're going to go and actually try to replace a power module that's on the port side truss. This is, you can think of it just like a circuit breaker. It controls loads to some downstream equipment. This one is currently failed and is preventing us from providing heater power to a light, and we also need that same power string to power our cameras that we're about to install. So when we've tried to replace this power box in the past, we had some difficulties getting it fully extracted because it was holding up on a bolt and a connector. So Saturday we're going to reattempt to get that out through ground control and try to get it fully extracted and replaced. If that is successful, then we'll go and be able to execute our planned timeline. Of course, we're prepared for the eventuality that it may not go that way. So we have a couple different timelines planned. One would be basically to take the high definition camera that we're going to install, and instead of putting it at the prime location, move it up to the top of the truss into an alternate location that still meets all of the inspection criteria that we have for this camera in terms of looking at the Soyuz, and so it's a equally good location for this camera. Alternatively, another option could be just take advantage of the fact that the crew is there at the work site and have them try to reattempt the manual replacement of this power box themselves and restore full functionality there. So name of the game is really maintain flexibility until we see how the robotic operations go Saturday night, and we'll be ready with one of those plans. That's sort of the big picture view of what I see coming up with the spacewalk. I'll hand it over to John Malarski for the details.
All right, John.
Thanks, Zeb. We'll go through some of the details of today's timeline. Looking forward to working the radiator retract, and we've got an animation to show the details of today's tasks. So here we are showing the front of the ISS, and then coming in first, Jeff Williams will be exiting the Quest airlock on his 5th spacewalk, and followed by Kate Rubens. Jeff having just over 1 day of spacewalking time. Jeff will lead from the airlock up onto the main truss segment. Because of the distance of the radiator from the airlock, it's actually on the end of the truss out P6, Jeff will be taking the safety tethers of both crew members out and setting them up on P1 to allow enough reach for them from the airlock all the way out to P6. And while he's taking care of that, Kate will wait at the airlock for him to set that up, and then he'll head out towards the solar alpha rotor joint, the Sarge, and then followed by Kate, who will come after. She will follow that same path and follow her tether to meet Jeff out there before they both head out to the prime task on the EVA, which is retracting the ticker, as Zeb mentioned earlier. As was mentioned, this previously tried to retract this on US EVA 33, and they had a lot of other tasks that they had to do, and were unable to get to this one successfully, but we were taking this as our prime task, and we'll go ahead and knock it out first on the EVA. So once both crew get outboard of the Sarge there, they'll inspect the radiator and the various mechanisms around it to make sure none of them will be in the way as we retract it. Both the shroud, and there are 6 inches rotated or located around it that they'll inspect. Kate will translate around the zenith side of that truss, and Jeff on the nadir looking at the radiator to make sure it's prepared for its retraction on this EVA. Once they've completed their inspections, Jeff will move into place to take his pistol grip tool, or PGT, power tool to retract the radiator manually while Kate gets in position to view the radiator's retraction to make sure it goes smoothly. With its location facing forward on the ISS, we'll have good views from the ground as well to help the crew monitor its retraction. As you see here, Kate will slide outboard and get a view of the radiator, while Jeff puts himself on the outboard side in position there at the bolt. As was stated, we retracted it previously, and we've got the video here of what we hope to see on this attempt is a nice smooth retraction of the radiator as it comes down and gets retracted fully to protect it from the MOD and thermal conditions, as Zeb mentioned earlier. Assuming a nice clean retraction there, and have got it seated fully, the crew will work to install 4 cinches, much as you would the lug nuts on your car tire. They'll work in a cross pattern diagonally from each other, installing 2 cinches here, and then they will slide and work a cross pattern, 2 additional cinches, and work back and forth a couple times at each bolt to get the radiator fully cinched and compressed into place. After fully securing all 4 of the cinches, the next step is to deploy a thermal cover in order to fully protect the radiator. Gets both thermal protection and micrometeorological debris protection from that cover. And deploying that shroud over the radiator will complete the retraction of the radiator and the prime task on the EVA. So here you see the crew. They'll move the shroud, which was sewed by a previous crew that deployed the radiator, Sonny Williams and Aki Hoshide, and they'll deploy that and cinch it tight to protect that radiator. Moving on for the second set of tasks on the EVA, Jeff will pick up a foot restraint here and make his way back inboard to the SSRMS, or the Canadarm2, for the high-definition camera task that Zeb mentioned, while Kate is translating back all the way to the airlock to retrieve those cameras for Jeff to install. So she'll pick up both a high-definition camera and a light from the airlock to put on the camera port 9 work site that's on the nadir side of the port 1 truss, while Jeff will meet the SSRMS that's being driven by JAXA crew member Takuya Nishi, who will then drive the arm in under Jeff's guidance so that they can get the foot restraint installed and the safety tether installed. While Jeff is installing that, Kate will come out to meet him with his bag of ORUs so that he can install them on the nadir side of the truss there, that camera just below where he is right now. After picking up his bag, they'll maneuver the arm down to the nadir side of the truss there. So following retrieving that bag for Jeff, Kate will have some secondary tasks that she'll go off to at the Solar Alpha rotary joint, the SARJ, cinching those bolts, as Zeb mentioned, and also doing a SARJ inspection. So she'll translate outboard, grab some tools that she'll need for those tasks, and then head back around to tighten the 3 remaining bolts of the SARJ. There were a 4th one that was previously tightened on US EVA 33, and they saw improvement in the data. So they decided that the remaining 3 bolts would hopefully finish the job there. So Kate will translate around 3 corners and give us good photos and video closeout as she goes ahead and tightens those bolts and secures the thermal booties around them. Previously on US EVA 33, they saw one of the booties was dislodged, and so we're going to make sure that if need be, if the Velcro is degraded on those booties, that they can put a wire tie to secure them in place. So she'll translate around to multiple joints here. Second one and then a third one. And depending on timing here and lighting conditions of how the EVA is going, she will complete a SARJ inspection. Previously on STS-134, the crew did lube the port SARJ, and the ground has done some testing to see how that lube will hold up over time. We'll get Kate's on-site inspection to verify that the ground testing is matching up with what happens on orbit. And we'll catch that during sometime during one of the day passes, and she'll come swing by here, give us her report, and take photos of that for later ground analysis. And while she's working on that, Jeff will work in here. He'll first change out this light. This is a light that has burnt out its bulbs, and once we get completion of the RPCM R&R that Zeb mentioned, they'll have a good heater circuit there for the light, new light to be put in its place and make this camera fully functional. And on the side of the standard definition camera that's already there, we'll install an additional high definition camera, so they'll be co-located to get both standard def and high def from the same pan tilt. And Jeff will clean up his work site and have Talk back the arm away. Following Kate Sard's inspection task, she will move back outboard towards the radiator work site that we previously were at. We have some ORUs that are pump flow control subassemblies that are ammonia pumps for the outboard elements, and those pumps had previously failed, and they are under an MLI blanket. And to enable future change out of these boxes by the SPDM, Dexter, Kate will fold back that MLI and tie it back, and so a future SpaceX mission can bring up replacement boxes. And so since the MLI was never designed for robotic compatibility, she'll just tuck that out of the way and wire tie it in place. That'll complete the main task objectives on the EVA for the day. So Jeff will guide Talk and the arm back to the same position he got in, and he'll egress the arm and stow both his foot restraint and remove his tether from the arm and get back on the structure for cleanup. Once he's cleaned up the arm and allowed Talk to move to the overnight park position, they will take the foot restraint and install it on the CETA cart for future use on another EVA. And then the crew will repeat a reverse direction of their egress, and Jeff will meet up at the tether anchor point while Kate heads back to the airlock, and they will use their tethers to move their way back to the airlock and ingress for a hopefully successful US EVA 37. And then we'll get Jeff back inside for preparation for his return just a few days later.
Okay, John, thanks very much. Fascinating EVA coming up. We have questions here at the Johnson Space Center. We also have questions from social media and on the phone bridge, so we'll get to it right now. Start off with Robert Perlman.
Hi, Robert Perlman with CollectSpace.com. Just to refresh my memory in terms of the last time this radiator was retracted, what gives the confidence now that it'll be fully retracted? Was it just a time issue last time, or what's the difference between this attempt and last?
Certainly. Thanks for the question. So the difference here is really coming down to the timing that we have in the tasks on this EVA compared to how we did it in the last EVA. And second is some of the other operations that were happening when we tried to replace it, or when we tried to retract in the previous EVA. So previously when we tried an EVA 33, this was combined with an activity that vents ammonia prior to the retraction. That venting spews some ammonia offboard. That creates actually an external torque on the station, and not really a big deal in and of itself, but over time our control moment gyros, which basically keep the station stable through space, start to have some difficulty reacting against the built-up momentum in those torques. With the crew far out on the outside of the truss segment, that creates additional moments and vibrations on the vehicle. And so towards the end of the EVA, those started to ramp up, and some low-level thruster firings had difficulty maintaining control. So as at the risk of losing partial attitude control of the station, we decided the best course of action was to re-extend the radiator and bring the crew back inside. The timing of this also came into a factor here. This was at the very end of the EVA. The EVA was running long at that time, and so we wanted to, we knew that to stabilize the attitude control, have the crew restow it, would have put the EVA way long. And so to protect the crew's day length and keeping them safe as a top priority really was what drove us to stop that one. This case is a little bit different. As John said, it's our first task coming right outside the door. So we've got lots of crew time available. We also aren't doing that ammonia vent associated with this activity, so we expect a good stable motion control system to not have those factors become an issue on this EVA.
And just a quick follow-up. The last EVA, when the decision was made to come inside because of the comm cap issues, you had the two get-aheads that were still a possibility. Is there hope to tack those onto this EVA, and in particular the inspection of the AMU?
So I think you mean inspection of the alpha magnetic spectrometer? Yeah, correct. So yes, those same get-aheads are still being carried on this spacewalk as well. And there's been, just to avoid any confusion on what the nature of this failure was we saw in the last EVA, the ear cup has a small speaker in it that has an air tube that's connected up to the actual earphone here. And if you get a drop of water in there, it's almost like a pipette or something, and that water droplet prevents sound waves from traveling through that air tube. We've seen this in the past. We've actually done some slight hardware modifications to try to prevent water from getting in there in the first place. This is very different from the water in the helmet situations that we've seen on both EVAs 23 and 35, where we had much more concern for crew safety. This was not a real system leak. This could just be a drop of sweat that got into the air tube there. So we have spare comm caps. We're swapping that one out on this EVA to make sure we have a good headset going forward, and that really should mitigate the problems here. Oh, sorry, AMS, yes. AMS, we are carrying that as a get-ahead to be able to go inspect that, as I said, and the seated cart brake handle tieback. So both of those are still being carried as options on the spacewalk.
Mark?
Thanks, Mark Carruth for Aviation Week. I have two. They're not quite related, but there was discussion, I think, at the opening of the briefing about this radiator, and does it still have a capability to function as a spare? Is that one reason that you want to retract and recover it? And then I wondered if you could go back to the robotic operation that's going to precede the spacewalk. You talked about a box. I don't know, I'm guessing, is that like a sequential shunt unit or some other electronic relay outside? What is it?
It's two different questions. I'll make sure I address both of them here. So the first one was, is this thermal radiator usable as a spare? Absolutely. That's why we're doing this spacewalk. It is totally functional. So we want to preserve its capability if one of the other radiators on the station starts to leak or has another problem. We can use this as a spare to go replace it. So it is not being functionally used at this point. It was used in early assembly sequences, and then we actually had to use it as an additional radiator capability when we saw a leak in one of our systems a couple years ago. Since we recovered that leak, fixed that leak, we now don't need this radiator, so we can retract it, and yes, it'll be a fully functional spare in the future if needed. And then so your second question, remind me again, Mark?
Oh, sure. It's the box that you're replacing robotically.
Right. Yeah, so this is it's an RPCM. So this really is it's a small box about 12 inches by 8 inches by 6 inches maybe. And this is, in the simplest terms, think of it as a switch. It's got a number of relays in it that have overcurrent protection like a circuit breaker, much smaller box than like the sequential shunt unit or MBSU that we've dealt with in the past. So this is a common box that they're located all throughout station. We've done several maintenance on this type of box robotically in the past. So that's the intent of that work.
Approximately when it failed?
I don't know when it's failed, and to be clear, the box isn't entirely failed. So it's got, as I said, several relays in there. There's just one relay in this box that has failed, and this happens to be the relay that's powering the circuit for our high-definition cameras and for our heaters on the luminaire that's outside. So regaining that functionality gives us the capability to install this camera. That's sort of why we're interested in getting it done now at this time. I can look into when it specifically failed and get back to you.
Okay, we have at least one reporter on our phone bridge. Please press star 1 if you have a question, and I believe we have Bill Harwood from CBS News. Bill?
Yeah, hi guys. Just one quick one for Zeb, if I can. I'm a little confused about those SARG struts. I'm not sure what you're looking at. I'm wondering, I remember y'all saw vibration when you had lubrication problems before. So is it the same kind of vibration? Is this a different issue? And just wonder if there's any relationship between lubrication and whatever it is you're seeing on those struts. Thanks.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Bill. So similar sensors were used in detecting this as we saw for previous SARG issues we've had in the past. Just to catch everyone up, in the past we saw pretty significant vibrations on our starboard truss rotary joint. And when the crew did an inspection at that time, they found some significant damage on the bearing ring and the gear ring that rotates that joint. The crew resolved this by laying a substantial amount of grease to lubricate that and prevent seizure of that gear ring and preserve its life. So in this case, we are seeing some small vibrations, not nearly at the level of magnitude that we saw in the past with the vibrations when we didn't have any lubrication there. So it's a much smaller order of magnitude. It's really a long-term life issue we're trying to protect here. We think it may be associated with these struts that we're going to bolt down. That may be a contributor. Until we get them torqued down, we don't know if that was the root cause of that vibration. So this is sort of looking at trying to attack some of the legs of the fault tree to make sure we've got that protected.
Okay, I know we have a plethora of social media questions. Haley, you want to get going?
Yeah, we have a great one from Linda on Twitter, and she's wondering, will all crew members be involved in the spacewalk in some way?
So we have all 3 of the USOS crew members are involved in some way. As John said, we've got Jeff Williams and Kate Rubens outside, and then Takuya Anishi will be inside, both driving the robotic arm. He'll also be the prime crew member that it will be getting the crew suited up in the morning and then getting them out of their suits in the afternoon. So he's got a really critical role to make sure that all goes per the timeline. So he's going to be playing a big part. We also have, as we did on the last EVA, we're bringing in help from some of our Russian cosmonauts to come into the airlock to help get the crew suited up in the morning. But really, we just have one of them participating in that. So there will be 2 other Russian crew members that aren't directly involved with the spacewalk.
Awesome, and we have another good one from Derek on Twitter, and he's wondering approximately how many orbits of the Earth will we see during the spacewalk?
Okay, you're making me do math in public. About 4. Mm-hmm.
And this is sort of a follow-up. Noah on Twitter is wondering what types of temperature sensations the astronauts will experience during the day and night passes.
So for this EVA, it's actually a little cooler than the last EVA. For the IDEVA, they were on the pressurized mating adapters, which are black, and so they see a lot higher temperatures. But this one should be more benign, and it's more benign than that one. But we can see temperatures outside up to a couple hundred degrees plus or minus. But this one should be in the more benign range.
Awesome. And we have another one concerning the cameras for the EVA. Elena on Twitter is wondering if the cameras are only meant to capture Earth imagery or if they can also capture space imagery as well.
Okay. As I said, these cameras are going to be great. They're actually the same model of camera that the crew has inside the vehicle to take video and still images. And they've been modified and put in a protective box to be stored outside. And so they'll be able to get high-resolution still images, video. My hope is once we get some practice with the settings and use of them, we'll be able to see some of the aurora, definitely some of the cities at night passes overboard. In terms of being able to see, long distance images of space and star clusters, that's really more in the Hubble range than in these cameras. But we'll certainly be able to get similar types of imagery and photography that you see from some of the crew pictures inside.
Awesome. And we have another good one from Facebook. And they are wondering, are we going to see them using any interesting types of tools on this spacewalk?
Go for it. I'm trying to think which one. For this EVA, it's actually pretty straightforward on the tools they'll be using. The main tool they'll use is the pistol grip tool, which is looks like a drill, but it's designed to provide precise torque output for tightening the bolts on the radiator to get that cinched down at the appropriate levels. That'll be the main tool that the crew uses. Probably the most unique tool to space that the crew will use is for the high definition camera. Jeff will have what we call a scoop, which is basically a portable handle that fits on any of our ORUs and allows them to move them around without touching some of the sensitive thermal coatings that some of the ORUs have.
I had one question for you guys. Onishi driving the arm, lab workstation or cupola workstation? Where will he be at?
So he's going to be at the cupola workstation for this. Just gives the best sort of situational awareness during the operations. There is a little bit of a variability, as I said, again with the RPCM operations. This is sort of getting into the weeds, but if we end up having to change out that power box with EVA support, that could cause us to have to go to our alternate string, and we may end up on the lab in that case.
Haley, did you have more?
This one is very specific, but maybe you can use it to talk to Spacewalk prep in general. Sarah on Twitter is wondering how many pages are on your checklist before they can get out the door to start the spacewalk?
Well, I don't remember exactly how many pages we have, but actually we've actually moving more and more electronic and away from paper procedures. So most of the procedures for prep and post on the EVA before and after the crew will use will actually be electronic. The main procedures they'll have on board that are actually paper are for any kind of contingencies or things like that where you need ultimate reliability and you're not worried about your laptop, battery dying or things like that. You have a paper procedure there. On the ground for the EVA itself, we'll have a paper copy of the task procedure so that we can write notes and easily refer and flip back across the pages.
Just a reminder, by the way, if you are trying to get on the phone bridge and have dialed in, you need to hit *1 if you have a question. Haley, anything else for the moment?
We have another very specific question from Alex on Twitter, and he's wondering, is there any possibility of them using the MMU on this spacewalk?
Okay. So the MMU was a prototype design that was flown to demonstrate capability to have the crew members fly basically a jetpack around the external environment. We actually don't have MMUs on space station. What we have is something called SAFER. It's similar in concept. It's a cold gas nitrogen jetpack that gets strapped onto the suit. The purpose of this is really contingency use only. If the crew members were to fall off structure and have a tether fail, the station can't fly after them, so the crew members can deploy the jetpack and be able to fly back to station, and certainly not something we want to use in a nominal situation. So it's there for contingency purpose. It'll be on them, but no intended plans for use.
Back here in Houston, Mark.
Thank you, Mark, for Aviation Week again. Sorry I lost the number of cameras you're going to install during the spacewalk. And I also had another question about the robotic operations. Will that be with Dexter on the end of the robot arm, or is this without Dexter?
Okay, so there's 2 that we're going to take out on this spacewalk. We actually have 3 on board, and there's plans to eventually get 3 installed. We're having the timeline, opportunity, and time to be able to get 1 installed. If we get really significantly ahead in the timeline, we have the second one available. We can try to get there, but really that's we'd have to be over an hour ahead on the timeline to get the second one installed. And so the robotic operations with the crew on the arm changing those cameras and light out, that would be without the Dexter. If we end up having to do work on that RPCM, then Dexter would be involved in that equation because it's what normally changes out that power box. So we'd have to use it.
Okay. Haley, any follow-ups here before we call it a day?
Yeah, we have one fan on Facebook who's wondering how long can they possibly stay outside with their resources like oxygen?
So the EVAs are typically planned for 6.5 hours, allowing also for a 30-minute reserve of their consumables. Depending on how much the crew's breathing the oxygen and how much CO2 they're producing, we have seen EVAs go up, set over 7 hours, but we will try to keep it 6:30 because our nominal plan for basically crew fatigue and their crew day length.
And we just got another one from Joe on Facebook, and he's wondering, what do you expect to be the most difficult part of this spacewalk?
So I think the part that'll be the most coordination will be the radiator retraction itself. So the large size of the radiator will require both crew to work together to compress the radial. You'll need one on each side, and they'll have to work in concert to get that fully secured. Whereas the other tasks will be more independent and should require less coordination.
Yeah, I'll just sort of add to that. One of the hardest parts of the spacewalk is actually not what you see when the crew steps out the door and during that day. Really, the plan as we're developing here, almost 3 parallel paths of spacewalk, as I said, maintain that flexibility. So there's just an enormous amount of behind-the-scene coordination to have 3 spacewalks ready to go, and we'll pick one on Saturday night when we have a plan.
Okay. Anything else here in Houston? Okay, I think we'll wrap it up. Thank you, gentlemen. We're looking forward to the spacewalk on September 1st, and we'll close our briefing with a couple of programming notes. Our coverage of the SpaceX Dragon departure from the International Space Station on Friday, this Friday, will begin at 4:45 a.m. Central, 5:45 a.m. Eastern Time. Dragon will be released at 5:10 a.m. Central, 6:10 a.m. Eastern. And then our spacewalk coverage on September 1st, just a few days before Jeff Williams comes home. Spacewalk coverage on the 1st begins at 5:30 a.m. Central, 6:30 a.m. Eastern Time. Thanks a lot again for joining us today, and we'll call it a briefing. Take care.